Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Interior Design lecture series for the fall. Behind me, you'll see the list of the architecture and interior design forthcoming lectures, which I hope you'll join us. The ones that are coming up on both sides, I think, are really interesting and maintain this kind of link on the interior design side of giving you the full spectrum, really, of interior design practice. And so for kicking off our series, I really want to thank Joan Blumenfeld for being here. She is the Global Design Director for Interiors at Perkins+Will, which is an international firm with over 24 worldwide locations. She's also the Interior Design Director of the New York office. Like many of us in the program, she has a background as an architect, and so combines this with a design excellence approach to interiors. Her diverse and prominent list of clients includes corporate firms, nonprofit organizations, as well as government and higher education institutions. The work has been published in national publications such as the New York Times, Architect, Interior Design, Contract, Architectural Record, Art in America, New York Magazine, and Vanity Fair. It's vibrant, it's elegant, and I think we'll really be inspired tonight by hearing Joan talk about it. She's also very active on both sides of the brick, so to speak, behind me. She was president of the AIA New York chapter and focused her leadership theme on the theme of architecture inside out, and really intended to create a dialogue on the importance of high-performance interiors, sustainability, quality of life. She worked on interior design excellence initiatives that address these topics within the Department of Citywide Administration Services, the Department of Design and Construction, and the Mayor's Office for more than a year, resulting in the first revamping of citywide workplace standards since 1971. Joan was also a board member of the New York chapter of the AIA, as well as a member of its scholarship and nominating committees. She's a board member of the New York City Building Congress, the New York Building Congress Foundation, and then the IIDA, the International Interior Design Association, Pro Mujer, the Harvard Graduate School of Design Alumni Council, and Women Executives in Real Estate. I want to really thank her for making it through, for her enthusiasm, really, and perseverance, making it to the CCA from a very snowy New York today. And a special thanks to Jessica Lissagor, our faculty in digital fabrication, for making the connection. Thank you. Please welcome me in joining Joan Blumenfeld.
Well, thank you, Catherine, for that very nice introduction. And this is a relatively small group, so first of all, I hope you can hear me in the back. And second of all, I think it can be fairly informal because we are a small group. I wanted to talk to you about not just what I do, but why I do it or how I think about why I do it. And I thought, particularly because this is an educational institution, and it would be good to talk about process as much as the final product. I'm going to use kind of a literary analogy for the whole thing, and I think it'll become clearer as I talk further about that why. And so the first part of this is going to be really talking about building a framework for how I think about what I do, because I think that design is something that has to be intentional, and everyone has to come up with their own structure for how they approach it. And for my own particular worldview, I think it started really when I read this book when I was in college, which has seemingly nothing to do with design, but it's about how the way that people think about science has changed. And I used to think that science was the search for the true solution or the true way of thinking about things. And this book really made it clear that science is really about coming up with a story, a structure, a framework for describing what is happening in the world. And then as our tools get better, that structure kind of falling apart at the edges until finally somebody comes up with a better one. And I think the idea that science is really the search for the most elegant story really struck a chord with me, and I really enjoyed the book. The next book is actually something that I also really came to. It's also, I think there is something about the rigor about science that I found really appealing in the way that the descriptions of the world came out. And this is a book by Richard Feynman called The Meaning of It All. And he was a very famous physicist who worked on the Manhattan Project when he, during World War II, designing the atomic bomb. And he also was the scientist who figured out what was wrong with the Challenger when the O-rings failed. And he was a very out-of-the-box thinker. He was a wonderful teacher. And this book was his attempt to explain what he thought about the world. And the interesting thing to me about it was that he had that same idea that there is no true explanation for anything, that we just come up with these stories that we tell. And he expanded that far beyond science and really talked about his view about the world that way, and talked about religion and his beliefs. And so again, this really reinforced this whole idea that I was starting to come up with. And then the last thing I'm going to mention here in that vein is I was reading the Science Times last week, and there was an article in there about the fact that most of the writers for The Simpsons are come out of math, are math whizzes, or computer science whizzes. There are a couple of PhDs, a couple of people with masters, a couple of people who almost finished their PhDs. And these are the people that are writing. And if you watched Homer Simpson, I guess there are a lot of the shows that actually have a lot of math in them. And Homer Simpson actually disproved Fermat's theorem. For any of you who are interested in math, you'll know that that's really silly. But the point of the article was to say that, to draw the parallel between a narrative or the structure of a narrative and the structure of science, and saying to the person who wrote the article, it made perfect sense that most of these people who were writing for Homer Simpson were scientists. So I guess all of those are a roundabout way of talking about what I think really is important in design. And I think that for design to really truly be design and not just a functional solution, it has to have a structure to it, and that structure has to have a trajectory. It has to have some kind, and the structure that you create will give whatever it is that you're doing meaning. And that meaning, people, they may not understand the underlying structure to it, but they will make some kind of an emotional connection to whatever it is that you have designed. And I think this is true for designing a piece of furniture or an iPad or a space or a building or a scientific theory. I'm going to kind of take now a step way back and then come back to some basics that I think are the ingredients that go into design that, as we know it now, in terms of our modern world and the world that we live in the United States in the 21st century. And the first is that one of those ingredients is sustainability. And I think, I'm not going to say a whole lot about it, but it is a given. It's something that, as responsible people, we need to be mindful of, and it should be embedded into how we approach projects, whether our clients ask for it or not. I think it's something that really should be a starting point. And at one point, I did a talk with two other colleagues from my office about trends in sustainability across different market sectors. And no matter who our clients are, whether it's healthcare or workplace or institutional clients or education, they are they are interested in sustainability, and even if they're not interested, we should try to get them interested, because it's a responsible thing to do. The basics on this are things that we try to incorporate into our work, and they have to do with allowing daylight into all of the spaces, into using less energy, less water, using recycled materials, and then using less construction waste. And these things we all know about them, and everybody kind of knows about LEED, and I won't go into each of them too much more. Another kind of ingredient in the mix is something that I call designing for health. And this is related to sustainability, but it's not the same. And I'm just going to run through some statistics really quickly. It used to be that the diseases that we worried about were infectious diseases. That was in the 19th century and early 20th century. And by the mid-20th century, we really made big progress on that. And what we're starting to see are the real problems of the chronic diseases like obesity and diabetes. So I'm just going to show you these. These are maps, and they color code obesity rates. And if you look, most of the United States, there's either no data here or it's like less than 10%. There's a few states where there's a little bit higher, 10 to 14%, and this is starting in 1985. And then I'm just going to quickly run through this and year by year. And you can see that it's really kind of horrifying. And we get to like the late 90s, and we have to add new colors. And then we get to the 2000s, and we're adding more colors again, until finally, the last statistics that I have, I got these from the New York City Department of Health, got it from the CDC. This is 2009 is the last data that I have, and I think it's actually leveled off a little bit since then because there's been some focus on it. But you can see that there are some states that have over 30% obesity, and obesity is at least 30 pounds overweight for a 5'4" woman. So it's pretty it's an incredible shift in our population. And I won't talk too much about this, but I will say that there have been a lot of studies that show that being in motion really cut down on obesity, and that our sedentary lives are a big contributor. So when we start thinking about how we design our spaces and interiors, I think one of the things that we can throw into the mix on top of sustainability is thinking about how we can make the spaces healthier for people, how we can encourage them to move. And one of the things that we found, there's been a lot of research around the fact that if people are healthier at work, then they are more productive, and that if they also are more satisfied about their workplace if there's some kind of focus on health at work. So there's a whole bunch of strategies that people can use to think about designing for health. One of these is active design, which relates to encouraging physical activity in one way or another in the building. And there are a number of ways that this can happen. One of them is by figuring out where you're going to put your stair in relationship to the elevators. People will tend to go to what they see when they first walk in a building. Another is basically having good signage if you can't relocate the stairs to identify where they are, and then to make them accessible to people so that even if it's a fire stair, you can actually, it's not locked so you can use it, and you can deal with the security issues somehow. To try and make those fire stairs, if you can't build a nice stair, into something that is pleasant for people to use. And then to allow people to have access to active space or some kind of fitness space. I did work with the New York City Department of Health in designing a lead point for promoting active design principles, and they have a whole book called Active Design Guidelines, which actually it's a great book. It's free. You can download it from NewYorkCity.gov, NYC.gov. And it has a whole list of things that you can do at all scales for architecture, for interiors, about that. Another thing I'll talk about just briefly is, and this is something that at Perkins+Will we really take seriously, which is not using materials that are unhealthy. There are a lot of materials, building materials, basic building materials that have things in them that off-gas that are really have been shown to be bad for your health. We have a website that has a precautionary list of things that we recommend against using with some alternate materials. And so when we do a project during design, we vet all of the things that we spec through this list to make sure that they are actually complying. It's not possible to get 100% compliance with this. There are a lot of things where there is no substitute, but we can at least get partway there. And then the last thing I'm going to throw in this mix of kind of ingredients that you mix together into some kind of a stew at the end is that there is whatever you do, both the design process itself needs to be integrative and collaborative, because bringing more voices in brings a richness to how problems get solved, and having an open mind to many different, coming at any problem from many different directions. And then that the spaces that we design also should be integrative and collaborative, so that people who use them will be able to do that as well. I'm going to start now talking a little bit about some specific examples. And if anybody has any questions at any point, since it is a relatively small group, I'd be happy to answer them, or just at the end. But I'm going to start talking a little bit about some examples of work, and I'm going to use this one. It's a competition that we did about a month or so ago. And it's an interiors competition for a headquarters building, and we had about 2 weeks to put the whole thing together. So it was put together very quickly, but what we did was put together a team of branding people, architects, interior designers, our workplace strategists, and we also brought on a person who, Ed Schlossberg, who has a firm that specializes in integrating wonderful, innovative technology into various spaces. And so we worked together on this, and we did brand mapping. We integrated technology into a lot of different places. This is a cafeteria, and actually one of the counters is actually like a concierge, where you can you order your food on your iPhone and then come down and pick it up. We mapped out the workplace and came up with a lot of different ways that people might want to work together. We talked about healthy food in the cafeteria and healthy food in the cafe. We talked about integrating also technology into the workplace. It's kind of on a layering of having different kinds of technology available to people, not just in conference rooms. And also built in a lot of collaborative space. And you can see some of these diagrams, and you can see some of the technology integrated into the space itself. And then put it all together into kind of a vision of what this company could be. With different kinds of, there actually was an animation, but I could not get it to link, so we'll just skip over that. But now I'm going to talk to you about some work, and the first project is I put in here because it really is like a very strong metaphor, and it's very literal in some ways, and I thought it would be an interesting one to start off with. It's a convention center in Seoul, in Korea, and it's also a wedding hall, because in Korea, weddings are incredibly important. And the first, thing that I will start with is how the scene where this is going to take place. And it's in actually the base of the tallest building in Seoul, which was built in the late 70s and is still the tallest building. It had not been renovated since it was built. And this just gives you an idea of what the space looked like. And they were feeling that, the owners were feeling that they weren't attracting people to get married there. And when you look at this, you kind of go, well, I don't think I'd want to get married there either. And so we did a lot of tours with them. We looked at a lot of different kinds of spaces with them. And a lot of them were very themed. And we thought, well, we want there to be a story for the bride and the groom to have when they come to this space, but we don't want it to be really Disneyfied. We want it to be something that is meaningful, but at the same time fun, but at the same time not hokey and a little bit more subtle. And so we started thinking about nature themes and the fact that that Koreans love gardens and nature, and they're an important part of their culture. And of bringing the outside in terms of natural themes might be something that would be appealing to people. And this is a section, it shows that atrium. And we came up with the idea of having some screens, just functionally, that would allow you to use the space around the atrium as public space and close the screens when you needed to and open them as you needed to, so you could open it up for it to be used across the escalator or enclose it into smaller spaces. And that theme would carry out into the entry canopy, so that even when you were dropped off into the building, you would know from the time that you got out of your car that this was a different environment than you'd seen before. And I'm showing you some drawings from on this one, I'm going to go through kind of design process and show you drawings that we did during the design process, and then what the finished product looked like. So these are images from either schematic design or design development, and then the final iteration of this. This was a rendering of that atrium with the screens open, and then this was an elevation of that. And on the left-hand side, is that, yes, left, is a mock-up we did, a full-scale mock-up we did with foam core and a light fixture. And on the right side is the actual screen. You can see we adjusted it a little bit after we did the mock-up. We made the scale a little bit smaller. And here you can see the atrium with the screens. And as you come up the escalator, and here they are open. And at the back of on each floor, there was what we called the flower wall. And this was the schematic design drawing. This was a little bit further along. We started coming up with an idea that there would be these glass tubes that would have flowers in them, and that they would change them. At first we were talking about real flowers, and they would change them with the seasons. And then we started realizing how incredibly insane that would be. And so we finally just resolved it that they are actually silk flowers that we had made in China and then put in there. And they can be changed when they get tired of that. They can put something else in, but they would not need to do that on a regular basis. And I think that was a much better solution. The conference halls, I'm going to show you some images here. Again, the theme of nature with kind of trees and leaves on the floor, and here are some elevations with using natural materials, wood and stone. And the next one, the photographs on this I'm going to show you are photographs that we did not publish. Because one of the things that happened on this project was we lost control of the furniture. And so you can kind of see what happened with that. But you can get an idea of the space. But we couldn't change the purple. So, and here's another one. And you can just kind of see how things morphed from the design that we had in our head into the actuality. We had an idea that the bride would wait in this room that was kind of this beautiful heavenly space. The bride waits in heaven. And so we thought about, how we would actually create something like that. And we came up with the idea of using plexiglass tubes that would hang down from the ceiling. And this was an image that we did showing the bride sitting there waiting in her heavenly bliss, waiting to get married. And there's the actual ceiling. And the amazing thing was that when the photographer went back to photograph this, there was a woman, a bride, sitting there getting married, and she looked exactly. She had the same hairdo, the same dress as the woman in the rendering. We just thought it was eerie. It was really strange. Oops, sorry. But the groom waits in the forest room, and there were some renderings of this, but the groom waits in the woods and the bride waits in heaven. I don't know if that has any kind of other meaning, but that's the way it ended up. One of the things that was fun about this project, we even got to have fun with the restrooms, and this was the bathroom that was for the bride and her family and the groom, and we thought it should look like a starry night, and that's kind of where it ended up. And even the public restrooms, which you saw a picture of before, ended up with a water theme, and that was the rendering of what they would look like, and that's actually what they ended up looking like when they were built. So there was a little bit lost in translation, but some of it not. The next project is a little bit more of a usual project, and it's a project for NYU. It's their Stern School of Business. And I think on this one, there are more of the ingredients that I talked about at the beginning. The other one is almost pure narrative. This one, on that one, we designed it sustainably, but it was in Korea, and there wasn't really any way of doing it LEED. This one was LEED silver, and here you can see what the existing kind of prelude to what we're going to do looked like. And what the narrative here is that NYU, we felt that NYU is an urban campus, and it's very similar to this campus in a way, in that it's not about the nice wood library, or it's really about being in a city and about connecting with that city. And we felt that the existing conditions really didn't do that. The other thing that was a challenge about this was that actually most of what we renovated was the lobby itself and the entrance to the building at the back, and then actually most of what we were renovating was underneath that plaza in front. So you actually walk into the lobby and go down, and there was no daylight down. Oops, I'm sorry. There was no daylight down there. So you can see this is actually where the footprint of the building, and this is what's underneath it here. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm pointing in the wrong direction. I don't have a pointer, but the footprint of the building is actually this. And this is where the plaza is, right under what you were looking at. This is what's underneath it. And so our job was to somehow renovate that. It went down 2 levels. So this was also a design competition, and this was a sketch from the design competition showing what we wanted to do, which was we wanted to, first of all, allow the community to see into this facility and make it more transparent. Second of all, we wanted to bring natural light down into it. And we also wanted the students to actually use the stairs and not use the elevators. And so the idea here that we came up with was to cut a very big hole in the lobby and put a stair in the middle, right in the middle, that went down all 3 levels, and then to put a skylight in the main corridor at the back, so that no matter where you were always looking at daylight, and that there would be a hole cut down in the back also that would allow the daylight to penetrate all the way down there. And those skylights would be walkable because they had to walk across them to get into the school. And so this was a rendering, again, of that lobby showing the stair going down. So the first thing you see when you walk in is that stair. This is the middle level, and then this was the lower level. And this is that back corridor, and we also added a stair, and you can see it right here, the edge of it, at the back also, so that the stair was always the most convenient way for people to get up and down. The other thing that we had hoped with this was that by creating this large central space, we would create some kind of community or heart for this school, which really up until then didn't have any. So on these images, you'll see an image of the existing condition and then what the final product for this looked like. And again, we worked with our academic programmers, we worked with our brand people. They did all the signage. And here you can see, one of the interesting things here is that if we had left the signage where it was, which was on the elevators, people would have walked around the stair to get to the elevator to see where they were going, and then to get them to come back would have been really difficult. So placing that signage actually right at the stair was really important to us to make sure that students would use it. This is the middle level of that 3-story space. And you can also see a lot of the branding that we developed and how we were really trying to create kind of some connection to the fact that this is New York City and this is an urban environment and an urban school. And then this is from the lowest level looking up. This is the corridor at the back. And you can see on the upper right what that corridor looked like originally and what it turned into. And actually, you can just see the handrail off to the left of the stair, the other stair that we added at the end of this corridor, so that people could use the stair here as well. And this is from the lower level of that hole cut where the skylights are. So the whole idea here was to convey the transparency of the school, the urbanity of the school, its real brand, and it was a real story about the students there and the experience that they were going to have when they were in that school. The next two I'm going to go through more quickly. These are two small projects. This first one is for something called Left Field Productions, and it's a company that does produces shows like Pawn Stars. And when they came to us, they were pretty much a startup, and this was their first real office. And both of these that I'm going to show have zero budget. They were done on really low cost. And you can see this a plan of it. And this is where they actually would do the production. And so again, this was about a very young demographic of I think their average age of employee was about 25, and a bunch of people who really didn't care too much about what their desk looked like, but they wanted a place where they could feel comfortable, where they could just hang out, so we tried to use a very limited amount of money to create that kind of a feeling. The actual the image on the right shows some of the production rooms, and they were clad in kind of a galvanized metal, just the kind of sheet metal that you use for ductwork, and it's reclaimed wood, which by this time has become a little bit of a cliche, and I think I'm never going to use it again, but at the time was kind of an interesting thing to do. And here's some images of, you can see they don't have too much of a desk, but they don't really seem to care. And one of the things we did here was to work with a graffiti artist, and they created this graffiti in the cafe. And the idea was that people would draw over it, but I think people like it too much and they don't touch it, so it still looks pretty much the way it is. The next one is similar in a way. It's this was the offices for Vente Privée, which some of you may be familiar with. It's a flash fashion site, and they were opening their first office in New York. They're a French company, and this is a plan of it. They didn't have, again, they had very limited budget. So what do you do when you have almost no budget? It was a story also about this is a place where fashion is really important, but how do you convey that when you just don't have a lot of money to spend on it? And so we had the idea to take the mannequins and just spray paint them white, and that became like the sculpture at the entrance. And if you look right next to the desk there, those are shoes that we spray painted and glued to the wall. So that's the kind of the artwork that we had. The furniture, we kind of, some of it was found and some of it was bought new. And as you come in, the person way at the end there is just coming in the front door where the mannequins are. There's like a catwalk where people can walk, and they actually do have some fashion shows in there and kind of use that in that way. There's a lounge at the end that where people can hang out, and again, people didn't really care too much about where they sat, but there are a lot of open collaborative areas where people can just hang out and talk to each other, and a lot of transparency, so you can see what people are doing. And this is one of the photo studios where they photograph the fashion and then put it online. Again, just using carpet tiles as area rugs because that was just an inexpensive way of doing that. This next one is a showroom for Hayworth, and we do a lot of showrooms for them all over the place. They are a furniture company that if you do interiors eventually you would be quite familiar with them. And one of the things, we work with our brand people when we work with them. We have helped them actually develop their brand. And so the showroom has to be a lot about their brand, but it also has to reflect whatever the local culture is in that where that showroom exists. And so this particular one was in Houston, and the showroom had these beautiful floor-to-ceiling glass windows, which you'll see. And outside the windows were wonderful live oaks. And actually, that is one of the wonderful things about Houston, is that there are live oaks everywhere, and they're beautiful trees. And for somebody like me who grew up in the north and never saw anything like them, I just thought they were just terrific. And so we use that. This is a kind of a bird's eye view. And you can see it's a relatively small space, but you can see where all those windows surround the entire space, and they're all floor to ceiling. And so we kept everything near the window as glass and transparent, and used the theme of the live oaks as a kind of starting point for how we would approach the design and choose all the materials. And these are some just different views of always looking out, always seeing those beautiful trees. And there you can see some of their typical branding. And Houston is a real city, in some ways a conservative city. And so there are a lot of private offices that we had to include in the design. And actually, they had to be quite large, but we put glass around them just so that you could still see out into those beautiful trees. The next one is an example of a project where we worked together with some of the architects at Perkins+Will, and this was a building that was designed for the University of Albany. It's a part of the SUNY system, which is like the University of California in New York, and it's in the most amazing, bombastic, modern movement Edward Durrell Stone campus that you could possibly imagine. I don't think we'll ever be able to build things like this ever again. They actually look a little bit Mussolini-esque, but it's quite wonderful in a lot of ways. And the little yellow square is our building. So how do you put something there that's going to relate to that environment? And you'll see how the exterior of the building does respond to that. The building actually is in an interesting place because they wanted students to walk through it on their way to get to other places in that campus. So they wanted it to be very transparent, and they wanted it to be very easily accessible from the outside. So we had this idea, we worked together with the architects to have this idea to create this big hole in the building that kind of turned the building inside out. And that all of the major spaces in the building would either relate directly to the outside or to that big atrium space that was cut through. And here you can see on the outside of the building how it does respond to that, the verticality of that Edward Durrell Stone campus by using that same white precast concrete. And here is another view of it. You can see that. And then we brought those exterior materials inside, the flooring and the way we approached the entire design of the building really related and made this seamless kind of journey from the inside to the outside. This is a view of the big atrium space that kind of cascades through the building, and this is from the middle level. This is the lower level, and this is where it looks out into a sunken garden. And then this is the space looking up, and you can see there's a big skylight at the top of it. And when we worked on the interiors, we oriented all of the spaces either onto this atrium space or to the outdoor glass. And here you can see an example of how even when you're deep inside that building, you can still see outside. So that there are all these layers of things that you're always looking through when you're at any given point in the building. And I think this image is a great image because it really does give you an idea about how the inside and the outside are really talking to each other, and about how the transparency of that building was one of the major major structural narrative points that we were working off of together with the architecture team. The last project is a project for a media company that we do work for in a lot of locations, most of them not in the United States, and this one was in Sydney. And another thing I forgot to mention on that project, the last project was LEED Gold project that met the 2030 challenge. This one, all of the projects we do for this company also are LEED Gold, even though they're really tiny, and that's pretty unusual because it's a big pain in the neck to actually go ahead and do all that documentation for a small project. But the client really believes strongly in sustainability, and so we do go through that with each one of these. For any of you who've been lucky enough to go to Sydney, it's a beautiful place. It's got wonderful weather, and it's right on the ocean, and it's surrounded by an amazing landscape. And so I think there's a kind of a theme that you can see coming through a lot of these projects of kind of relating back to the natural environment. And in this case, the other thing about this project is that it was in an incredibly interesting building, and the building is itself was a beautiful, beautiful building in an oval shape with a kind of a organically shaped amoeboid atrium in the middle of it. And so we decided that we would really pick up on that, and I don't think there's a straight line anywhere in what we put in, or very few of them. And this is the reflected, I don't usually show reflected ceiling plans, but this is a reflected ceiling plan because it wasn't an easy thing to resolve with all of these curves, but I think in the end, the ceiling really helps. These are some design development drawings that we had, and we thought really about the fact that there's a beautiful terrace on the second level of this, because this is the penthouse, and we thought, well, there are trees on that terrace, and wouldn't it be great if when you were walking outside on that terrace, you walked inside, and you're still in the trees, you're still in, and we're referring back to that kind of beautiful experience of that terrace. And there are also fish tanks in this one, which have a lot to do with a lot of what happens in Australia, because in Sydney, particularly because you're right on the ocean there. But it also is because this particular company likes fish tanks. So, and here you can see some of these images and how all the materials are kind of irregular in shape and organic, and trying to play off of that idea of the natural environment. And the inside-outside thing that's going on here also. That's the atrium that you can see that's off on the right of this image. I'm sorry, yeah. And also, on all of these, the work areas pretty typically have low panels so that people can talk to each other, if they have panels at all. In this one, everything was down below 42 inches, and the client was even wanted, and for the monitors in this conference room to retract, which they do. So they go back down into the credenza, so when you're not using them, you actually can see right across the conference room out to the window. And these are some more images. And you can see also, this client also really believes in designing for health. And so anywhere they do a project that's got more than one level, they put in a stair. And this stair actually really ties you back into the whole idea of the trees. And when you're looking up, that the image on the right is what you're looking up at. It is like looking up into a tree. This is one of the conference rooms in the upper level, and instead of trying to curve, there are glass walls around this conference room so that it can be open to what's going on around it, or it can be enclosed. And the easiest thing was just to put a curtain on there, because it's hard to figure out how you're going to make movable partitions and curves that are, particularly when they're not regular. And here you can really see the idea about the trees outside and the trees inside, and you're sitting on little rocks, either outside or inside. And finally, you're out on that beautiful terrace, looking out on the Sydney Harbor with the trees. And that's it.